Um, Thank you again for having me. As I mentioned very quickly again, my name is Yasemin Erboy, and I'm a manager with CLASP, which is an international NGO that has various offices across the world. And we look at appliance efficiency from a people and planet perspective. So what we mean by that is that we look at the environmental performance and efficiency of appliances and equipment that we use across the board. In more developed countries, our climate team looks at more policy related work that can help improve the efficiency of appliances that we use on the grid. So traditional electricity systems like we have here in the US and you have in Canada. And our clean energy access team, which I am a part of, looks more across developing countries where there might be weak access to grid electrical grids and or no access at all. So that's really what I'm going to talk to you about today. And you might be surprised, but there is some relevance to Canada as well in there. So I am a numbers and stats person. We're all nerds at CLASP, and I will share a lot of numbers and statistics and visuals with you, but I want to start from the people perspective, because that's really why we do our work, right? The people that work in sustainable development, we focus a lot on the end users and the people that these efforts will change the lives of. So the best way I know how to explain the real reason behind the work that we do is to ask you to just stop for a second in our current lives and to imagine spending your average day without any electricity, any appliances, any outlets or plugs. What are the things that you can still do just with sunlight? What can you no longer do in your day? Can you make your coffee or tea in the morning? Can you go to the dentist? Can they actually, fix a crown or do a procedure for you? Can you do your job? A lot of our jobs are based on, doing exactly what we're doing right now, right? Talking on the phone, talking through a computer, typing on a computer. If you have children, can they go to school and can they learn at school? Do they have enough light to see by? Can you access news and information if you don't have a TV? Can you prepare your meals? Can you keep your food safe and refrigerated? And then on the flip side, at night, if you imagine spending your average evening and night completely in the dark or just by candlelight, what can you still do? And what can you no longer do? Can you see where you are? Is it safe? The kind of lights that you have. Because a lot of people, especially in developing countries, use kerosene to light up, little gas tanks and lights and breathe in the fumes from that too. Can you read? Can you watch your favorite show? Can you do any of the hobbies that you like doing at night? Can you make dinner for your family? Can you go outside for a walk or for a run and see where you are? Can you feel safe doing that? Especially as a woman or as a member of a marginalized community. If you have children, can they do their homework at night? If you had an emergency, can you call a doctor? Can they see you? If you're a woman and you're about to give birth, can you give birth at night? These are all very poignant questions once you really start thinking about, okay, for myself in this particular room, if I removed all my lights and my computer, I couldn't be talking to you right now. I couldn't be doing my job. So it's really getting to the core of the problem. And the global context for this problem is that currently 770 million people live without access to electricity. And by virtue of that, without access to electrical appliances or any equipment that boost productivity or provide things like cooling, refrigeration, communications. And in the sustainable development community, we go by the sustainable development goals, which are meant to be achieved by 2030. And in order to be able to do that for energy access and to grow the market for off-grid appropriate appliances, we have a lot of problems currently that need to be addressed. Product efficiency and affordability is what we look at. There's also awareness raising, distribution. How do you get all of these appliances, even if they are efficient and they are able to run on smaller solar systems, which is what we usually try to pair appliances with. They're called solar home systems, the solar panel and a battery that can do anything from being able to power a couple of lights all the way up to multiple appliances. How do we get them to the people that need them the most? How do we facilitate access to finance for these people? How do we change some of the policy and regulatory environments of these countries? And then looking at your particular local context, as you would imagine, electricity access is at 100% in Canada, but it is difficult still to assess the current uses for remote communities. Canada is a very large country, and you have a lot of communities scattered over vast regions that are relatively diffuse, right? So there are smaller populations in relatively larger and sometimes hard to access areas. And these communities include, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal settlements, and this emphasizes the leaving no one behind remit of our sustainable development efforts. There are a lot of similar contexts like these where different communities, for whatever reason, are marginalized or are not reached by regular national policies, et cetera. And it sounds like while a lot of the regional bodies that are in charge of these communities may have good knowledge about different aspects of energy use in the communities, this information is not readily shared and is often difficult to put together sort of in a common format. And again, why appliances matter, if we kind of zoom back out to why we're talking about this particular topic, they allow us to do anything from access and cooling, which are increasingly essential for health, productivity, and survival. Before everybody joined, Kirsten and I were talking about having record temperatures both here and in Canada already, and it's barely June, right? So when you don't have air conditioning, or you don't have a refrigerator that can keep your food safe, keep you safe, it's very difficult, and especially with heat waves increasing in other parts of the world that could really benefit from even just a small fan. Agriculture, increasing agricultural productivity enhances food and income security, again, with climate change and changing weather patterns, increased drought, more unpredictable sort of rain patterns. If you have a solar water pump in a farm, that farm is more likely to be able to increase their yields, to be able to sell some of the food that they produce, and to provide for their family. This all kind of wraps up under this term that we use of productive use, which basically appliances that are key to income generation and poverty alleviation across the board. It could be things that are very obvious, like a solar water pump that I just mentioned, but it could also be a TV. If a little restaurant in a small community in Kenya, for example, gets a TV to play sports for their customers, then that boosts their income. And then again, health, which is very important currently, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic and the response to that, vaccinations, as well as taking care of people who are severely sick, providing reliable access to health services for clinics and health centers that currently lack it, is really done through stable and efficient access to lighting and appliances. I mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals before. There are many, I believe 15 of them. The one that we focus the most on is Sustainable Development Goal number 7, which is affordable and clean energy. Again, a number of people that still lack access to modern energy services and clean cooking is incredibly high, and population growth is sometimes continuing to outpace the efforts that we can make to provide access to modern energy services to these populations. But it relates to good health and well-being through enhanced medical care. It relates to zero hunger when we increase food supply. It helps improve access to education, access to clean water, reduced poverty, and enhances gender equality as well, because it reduces drudgery. If a woman is able to have a refrigerator to hold her food so she doesn't have to go to the market every day, if she has an electric cook stove so she doesn't have to go carry wood for open fire cooking every day, all of these allow us to free time and catch up to men in their communities as well in terms of income generation or more productive uses of their time. When we look at customer impact data through the research that we do, you can really see the effect it has on the quality of life of people. Again, talking about solar water pumps here, prior to accessing a solar water pump, the respondents had much higher weekly costs on fuel or hired labor to help with pumping. 82% of the customers said their quality of life had very much improved, or at least slightly improved. And for those who said, there was no change, it was really just too soon to tell. 75% said that their productivity had increased. They worked less but had more yields, and through that had more income. And again, looking at those economic impacts, their incomes increase, they can save more, they can grow more throughout the year, so they can expand the sort of the wet season growth period to really be able to have more yields during longer periods in the year. And I took a few screen grabs of some of the sort of customer profiles we have here for you to really hear from the people themselves that we try to help. Here's one from Uganda. It said, getting the fridge has helped because if a child asks me to buy them a book, I can take money from what the fridge has earned us. The money is there and I use it. This person has managed to grow a bigger garden the previous year, increasing their income, which they've used for paying school fees, adding more cattle, and paying for all the basic needs for my family. And you'll notice, like especially for household and smaller community appliances, this is a running theme: being able to provide for their family, having enough money for education for their children, and having larger income. And then for health centers, for deliveries at night, these nurses and doctors just referred the mother to another clinic or called for an ambulance. They were not able to meet the services that they required, that require light. So, to give birth by candlelight, to have an emergency procedure and not be able to do it within your community, but to have to travel for hours to the next hospital, which is then also overwhelmed with the number of people that they cannot serve, right? So all of these things really, appliances run the gamut across all of them. Then when we look a bit more at sort of the statistics around this energy disparity that we're experiencing between what we call the global north, so more developed countries, and the global south, so less developed countries. The household energy consumption in the United States and Europe is 5 to 10 times greater than in India, and 20 to 200 times greater than in most of rural Africa. Obviously, Africa is a very large continent with many different countries that have various levels of poverty or emerging economies. But just imagine that that disparity. And then in terms of appliances that we own in a typical household here in the US or in Canada, we have 15 to 40 appliances in our house. When you really start thinking about how many lights I have, how many phones do we have, how many iPads, how many, we have a stove, we have a refrigerator, all of these things add up. But then in rural Africa, people may only have 2 to 5. And then when we look at appliance penetration, so the percentage of people who do have access to some kind of appliance in rural areas, the penetration is even lower. So I added Canada here to the visual that we already had. You'll see that 89% of people, I think as of 2021 in Canada, had a refrigerator, and basically 99 to 100% had televisions. But then you can see the percentages in sub-Saharan Africa and India are much lower, 17% across all of Africa. But then when you look at rural areas, it's only 4% for refrigerators, for example. And what we at CLASP and in general, our sector try to do is to increase energy efficiency and performance and quality of appliances that can work with solar panels or solar systems to maximize energy service delivery. So in this visual, what you see are the energy system requirements of a number of appliances. Be basic, if in a small house, if you had one phone charger, one TV, one radio, one fan, a few lights, and a refrigerator. To power the regular conventional on-grid refrigerator that we all have in our homes, you need almost 9 times more, many more solar panels than what we can use if they're appropriately designed and a super efficient refrigerator. Same with the battery size. So you're really just kind of seeing that change and being able to use less energy to power more appliances and to do more and to increase and boost productivity is our main goal. So this slide just sort of shows the expectations we have, in our sector, and the hopes that we have for these communities versus the current reality. So on the left, you see the cumulative market potential of fans, televisions, and refrigerators stacked on top of each other. And currently, this sort of potential market is estimated at 12.6 billion US dollars globally. And it's predicted to grow, basically to double in size by 2030. And that all sounds great, right? Problem solved. If we have these appliances and they're efficient and people want them, we can get to our goal. However, when you think about what we call the addressable versus obtainable market, the addressable market is the theoretical market, all of the people who can and should have access to these appliances, but the obtainable market is really the ones that can currently afford these appliances, and it is significantly smaller, mainly due to limited access to finance and consumer accessibility, and also awareness. So the more efficient versions of these appliances, even though they may be smaller for, more suitable for these smaller contexts, can still be quite expensive. And they are sometimes too expensive for a household who may be living just above the poverty line to access outright, to pay right away. In the same way that we have, payment plans or credit card systems, things like that, we try to incorporate similar financing mechanisms for these communities. Sometimes it's hard because they may not have any track record for credit history. Many of us have had credit cards for many, many years, right? But in a sort of more informal setting, a bank is not going to risk giving a loan to a farmer who's never had any association with that bank before. So trying to address basically the affordability problem is really the next step, I think, for our sector to really make meaningful change and to be able to provide all these communities with the appliances that they need. And some of the barriers to development, barriers to market development that I think I've touched on, but it really runs across all stakeholders that are engaged in this sort of value chain from start to finish. Energy service companies are still having trouble identifying and sourcing efficient and high quality appliances. There are a lot of knockoffs. There are a lot of cheaper products out there that may be cheaper and easier for some of these communities to access, but then they break down and then they have a bad impression of the appliance, or there's mistrust in the community and they choose not to buy the next one, or there's not good service afterwards. In the way that, if our refrigerator breaks down or it's making a funny noise or it's not cooling enough, we call a technician, right? And they come in and they address the problem. If you don't have technicians in these communities that are able to do this work, then it becomes really hard to repair appliances. And there are a lot of cases in which they just sit and break down because nobody told, the customer, oh, you should keep your solar panel clean. Just really basic new appliance user training is also very important. Appliance manufacturers are often not familiar enough with this marketplace to design and market their products effectively. They're much more used to catering to an on-grid, again, sort of more developed country setting. Investors and microfinance institutions don't know how to target investments in this space and how to incentivize appropriate procurement, again, of quality and efficient appliances. And then policymakers also lack product performance data to really scope market transformation policies or programs. And these barriers, inhibit the growth that we can hope to see in the clean energy access market. And also they exclude underserved communities from accessing these benefits that could be provided by appliances. Finally, I just wanted to end with what can we do as individuals, right? I know this topic is probably a little bit tangential to your environmental committee, or sort of what you might be focused on, like what can I do to reduce my carbon footprint? What can I do to be more environmentally friendly? But there are things that can be done about sort of appliances that we use daily, and also in the communities that I mentioned that even exist in Canada and across the world who don't have any access to these things in the first place. Some of the things that we can do is to help raise awareness, and this could be via interpersonal connections, exactly what we're doing right now, or globally via social media. It's a great tool to use and to leverage to kind of bring this kind of sustainable development conversation to more people. you can get curious and learn more about your own country's off-grid communities, and see if they need any help or there's any opportunities for volunteering, or for supporting subsidies for them, etc. Supporting the Sustainable Development Goals overall, which I provided a link here. I'm happy to share the slide deck with you afterwards. But there's a tracker that shows progress being done across all Sustainable Development Goals, and you can kind of see how that is moving along, where there are gaps and where, again, more awareness raising and more conversation is needed to help push the right stakeholders towards doing something about it. In your daily life, you can also employ your own purchasing power. You can pay attention to the energy efficiency, performance, and sustainability aspects of your appliances to see if you can recycle one of your appliances after they break down, or you want to replace them. You can replace your appliances less frequently. You can look at electric and induction cook stoves, for example, instead of gas. And you can also support enabling policies by voting, but also by following international news and seeing what other countries are doing, especially on this topic. And if there is any opportunity for advocacy or support, taking those opportunities to lend your voice to help solve the problem. That is all from me. Again, here's how you can reach me in our websites, just in case you want more information after this conversation. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Yasemin. Thank you very much for this presentation. It was really very informative. This topic, I don't know much about it, so it was really helpful for me. I hope you all find it as well. Do you have any questions to Yasemin? Yes, Susan.
I have one question about energy efficient refrigerators and devices such as this. When you buy refrigerators now, they give a like an energy rating as to how much it uses. I find that the more efficient they are, the shorter the time period they last. Do they actually give expected times for them to, lifetimes of the
That's a great question.
as well?
I don't know as much about on-grid appliances as I pointed out. I'm happy to ask any specific questions you may have about sort of our more sort of policy and on-grid work to my colleagues. But in this particular case, I will say, well, two things. One, I think it's not necessarily just for efficient refrigerators, but across the board for all appliances, right? They all die on us much earlier than they used to. The cell phones, that we have, the batteries die within half a day. I remember my first cell phone lasted a week without charging. We used to replace things much less frequently. It's part of sort of the consumerism attitude, unfortunately, and it's boosting economies that being able to replace or making customers replace their appliances more quickly basically means you buy more, right, and support those industries. On the other hand, I do not think that product performance indicators have anything about lifetimes, but that is really interesting. For us, it's very inconvenient when our refrigerator dies, and especially if we spent a lot of money on it, and if it's efficient and we're excited to have it, and if it dies too quickly, that's a problem. But in the communities, for example, that I talked about, if your refrigerator dies, and that was maybe a refrigerator for us now is 5% of our annual income, maybe less. For them, it could be their entire annual income. It's the amount that they risk on those appliances is much higher. And if you can't repair or fix those appliances, or you can't guarantee that they'll last a long time, then it's even more devastating. So some of the research that we're doing now are called longitudinal studies. So basically, not only the quality of life stats that I shared, like when a farmer, like when a number of people access solar water pumps, what were their impressions on it in the first 6 months or a year? That's great. But we want to revisit them several years later to see if those appliances are still working. And in many cases, they aren't. And that is really frustrating. Sometimes it's user error. There are people who just don't know how to use a refrigerator, and they try to pry like the ice off of the freezer with a knife, things like that. But it could also be the appliances themselves, and that is a really important piece, I think, to incorporate more into how we advertise products moving forward.
Susan,
I know, like my parents' refrigerators that last a lifetime.
Exactly.
But you can't buy a refrigerator like that. And now, I mean, yeah, they were used a lot of energy all the time. However, there was a trade-off in the amount of
They
energy,
did, and they also
resources that are
used
used in replacing these. Yeah.
they also used pretty polluting refrigerants, which we also work on phasing out. So CFCs and other, you know, volatile compounds that have been used a lot in refrigeration, and that, you know, obviously are not the best environmental, you know, consequences. So yeah, all of those have, yeah.
Have you looked at refrigerators that are powered by heat as opposed to electricity? I mean,
Yes.
they've been around for a long time, you know, and
Yes, I think they're called SSD type refrigerators, if I'm not wrong, or like direct drive. So yes, making use of.
They're powered by heat, like propane.
Oh, I am not sure about that, but we do have a type of refrigerator that's in particular, I think, used for vaccine refrigeration.
Yes.
That does make use of latent heat and turns it into cooling. They do tend to be more expensive and slightly harder to manage in these off-grid settings that I talked about, but we do have, and there's Peltier cooling, I think, which is another type of cooling mechanism that's not just traditionally like plugging it into an electrical outlet.
That was 60 years technology, 60 years ago.
Yeah.
We are going back, you know.
Hey, if it works, you use it, you know.
It was working. Yeah. Because at that time they didn't have electric generators, so they had refrigerator on gas.
Mhm.
Used to have a gas refrigerator.
Yeah, exactly.
Susan, I think you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Gulsen. The high efficiency appliances you're talking about, Yasemin, aside from the ones that may be powered by heat, are you talking about the appliances that we find in big box stores, or is it another category altogether, a specialized type of appliance?
It's pretty similar, and you can find some of them in, you know, just street markets, like in Pakistan and Bangladesh, for example, the fan market, fans that run on DC current, which is basically we use AC, alternating current in our current grid settings. DC is direct current. Either whether it's AC or DC, just smaller efficient fans that can run on less electricity and that you can use with a solar home system or any other solar setup. You can find it. They're commercial. They're everywhere in those areas. But then, for example, in Africa, you don't really find them because there's not much of a market for it in those communities. It's just sort of like a lot depends on which market you're looking at. But no, they're all just higher efficiency and it's usually smaller. So, you know, the average size TV, for example, that we maybe look at in off-grid settings may not be the giant TVs, you know, that we have in our current homes, but big enough. And they're actually quite on par, I think, with on-grid TVs at the moment in terms of efficiency, performance, and price. So TVs, fans are the most commercial, and also lights just in general and phone charging are the most commercial and most easily available and cheapest appliances that we look at. But then when you get into larger systems like refrigerators, solar water pumps, etc., the price and the availability goes down. But for example, the refrigerator we're talking about is probably a fridge you might expect in a dorm room, like that size, or it could be a big sort of chest refrigerator. Again, nothing fancy, nothing, you know, big necessarily, but big enough for those households and communities to be able to refrigerate their water and sell it cooled off for a higher price, or, you know, to be able to keep some of their food chilled at home. And also for health centers, those are obviously, vaccine refrigerators are a little bit different, but they would be on par with what we would have here. It's just in our communities and in our lifestyle, we just don't think or care about efficiency because we have all the electricity that can charge these things. We just look at designing the same products just to run on less, if that makes sense.
So what countries would you find, for example, refrigerators that can function off-grid?
So we do work across a lot of East Africa and in India, to many other communities too. It's just a lot about availability, and we do run some competitions around identifying the highest quality off-grid appropriate, so like appropriate to these, resource constrained settings. Refrigerators, we've done solar water pumps. We're looking at e-mobility next, actually. So electric scooters or two-wheel, three-wheel, sort of like the little, tuk-tuks and other things that are used in some communities as part of, their transportation. So again, it's from a light bulb or a fan size all the way up to a solar mill, for example, or a grinder or a food dryer, these really large scale equipment that are more community based. So yeah, you can find off-grid refrigerators across the board in many places. It's just the question is, are they affordable enough, and are they high quality enough to last long enough, like we said, and to work properly for these communities.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
the thing with the DC is solar panels make DC. And if you want to get AC power, you have to convert it to get AC, which generates losses. And then in a lot of the appliances, if it's like a TV or a phone, you have to convert it back to DC, which again gives you more losses to be able to use it. So powering things like cell phone chargers or TVs directly, or even fans, because it's just a motor, and DC motors work quite well. But that's the reason for going to DC.
Yes, exactly. And we do work with a lot of sort of those conversions, making it easy. And then there's also this concept of interoperability. So we don't always have this problem in our houses, but like, let's just imagine if you have an iPhone and your spouse has an Android phone, you can't use the same charger to charge both appliances, right? And the same thing happens in these off-grid communities, especially since the appliance companies or the companies that manufacture and provide all these appliances are very specialized, and they want their customers to use the TV they sell or the refrigerator they sell with their own system. So they make the connections only available for their own solar home system or their own outlets. So we're working on diversifying that so that a TV from one manufacturer can be used with a solar home system of another, and make it a lot easier for customers to know what they can buy and use, and also to increase competition a little bit.
Thank you. Thank you, Yasemin. And really, as I said, I'm really proud to have you
Thank you.
here, as a Turkish woman in an international area. And hope to see you again, and maybe we can cooperate in some other ways.
Same, it was my pleasure. And please let me know if you have any other questions afterwards, or if you're more interested to find out about anything I mentioned. I'd be happy to share more information or more reading materials.
And we're going to share this with in our Rotary Club of Westmount Facebook and Instagram pages. Okay.
If you want to stop the recording, you can do that, Gulsen.
Yeah.
You can stop the recording.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. No. Just a moment. I'm not good in this, Where? I cannot.
Well, we can keep going, and then we can figure out how to edit. How's that?
Yes, but
It's okay.
you know what?
Okay, Gulsen.
Why I cannot see the.
It's okay. Well,